Hello, everybody.
Hi, all.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Who all do we have? We have Josie. Hi, Josie. Erish.
And Emily.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Bob. Is that you on the phone?
That's me. So I'm on that 541 number.
All right. Can I rename you Bob O'Brien on here?
You sure can.
There he is. That'll help my head. All right. Well, it's 4:02. Let's go ahead and call to order since we have a quorum. And do we have anybody in the waiting room? Mila, can you hear me? I just got a confused look from you. Okay. Lovely.
I just started the YouTube streaming, and so I was hearing the YouTube in the background on my computer. We're good now.
No worries, no worries. All right, I see that we're streaming. Great. So just to restate, so we are calling to order. Since there's nobody on or in the waiting room, we'll just give it a moment to see if there's anyone who'd like to join for citizens to be heard. And if you are in the YouTube, if you're watching the YouTube link, there's a bit of a delay. We're about 30 seconds ahead of you. So jump in right now. The sign-in details are on the top of the packet, and we'll also do a quick call for citizens to be heard at 5, just in case. These are for anything that is not, well, I guess anything on our agenda today, since we don't have any public hearings. Okay, while we are waiting to see if anybody joins us, does anybody on the commission have any ex parte communications or disclosures to make for any of the items that are on our agenda today?
I don't, but I had a question about something you said earlier. I know the county council has recently switched the way they do comments, so that instead of on each individual thing, you know, they're more bunched up together and citizens to be heard. And it sounds like now we're following their lead and doing it that way, but I guess we don't have to if we don't think it's a good idea. I just wonder if we should discuss that.
That's what we've been doing for the last several meetings, following what the county council has been doing. So obviously any public hearings have their own discrete time set aside, but that way, you know, we have one time where people can join to make comments and nobody has to be worried about not having their voice heard. And we can make sure to capture those all. That said, we've had a couple situations where somebody has joined late or made a comment that they want to speak during a discussion item, and we've been pretty accommodating. So I don't know that we need to have a hard and fast rule if an anomaly does come up.
Okay.
Did you have
I think sometimes it's just useful to have the comments, you know, closer to the discussion. And I know that for people with big agendas like the city council or county council, you know, I understand why they want you to put limits, but since our meetings tend to be a lot lighter, you know, maybe we don't need to be as strict. I don't.
Let's park this and come back during future considerations.
Okay.
Okay. Great. So no disclosures or ex parte communications. And I do see that somebody has joined. Is that Gail Ellison? Gail, did you want to make a comment under citizens to be heard?
They're one of the applicants for the project on our agenda later, so I assume that's what you're here for.
Perfect. Gotcha. All right. Well, with that, we will move toward reviewing and adopting our minutes from July 13th. I did notice, where is it? A typo, small typo towards the bottom of page 3. My last name was spelled Campbell, not Campbell, so Commissioner Campbell. I was searching for it a moment ago. I know I had seen another typo, but I couldn't find it. On second pass. Did anyone else have any other comments about the minutes? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Sure, I'll move that we pass the minutes with the typo correction.
I'll second that, Bob.
All right, moved by Bob, seconded by Garish. Any further discussion? All right, so I'll call for a vote. Most of us have our videos off. So Josie, Kevin, there we go. So all in favor of passing the minutes, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye, this is Rachel.
Aye.
Okay. And we are missing Brian, so that is unanimous passing of the minutes. Lovely. Great. So our discussion item for this block, we want to review the workshop. Let's see. Was everyone on this call there? No. Rachel, were you able to go and listen in? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
I think out of your interview, you really
Yeah.
want to
Let's see
identify.
here. Bob, I'm going to mute you. Okay. So we want to just review the workshop takeaways. There were a few things that we kind of left open, feedback that we received from council. Would love to have a time to just discuss some of the words, some of the phrases that we heard come up. We don't need to get to a final vision statement today, but just to start to draft some high level thinking there, summarizing what we've heard from the community so far, obviously in all of the public outreach that we've done and the various ordinances that we've made recommendations to in the last several years, the applications that have been made to us. And then talk a little bit about that zone use, how we might start to come up with a few more discrete models for different ways to approach based off of underlying zone changes if necessary or as recommendations, and also zone use conditions related to those three examples in question, what has been question one of the survey. So Mila, I think those are the three things that we said we wanted to take away. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind giving a quick summary of just how the survey is going, how many responses we've received, and if you're starting to see any trends in those responses as they've come in so far.
So I have no updates on the survey. Olivia has our SurveyMonkey login, and I haven't gotten in there yet. So we will have some updates for you either next meeting or in the interim as soon as we get them.
Okay. And so one thing we also have to keep in mind is we do have on our schedule a meeting with another workshop with the county council in August, and we don't have a set date for that. And I think it would be wise if we started to come up with things that we think should be on that agenda as early as possible, just so that we can stay aligned, be communicated with county council during that process, and make sure we make valuable use of their time and our time as part of this process. So just another bullet for us to be thinking about.
And I did just hear from Olivia, she's unable to join the Zoom meeting, unfortunately, but we do have over 100 responses so far.
Wonderful. There was some conversation about making those responses available, or providing regular summary updates. And I just didn't know if you all were able to have any conversation about that as staff since the workshop.
Yeah, we'll be able to do that. That's not a problem.
Okay, cool. All right, so takeaways from the workshop. Anything that we feel like we definitely need to discuss in this meeting. Some things that came up, for example, were moving the northern boundary down. So I think probably starting the process early, so sometime this fall, of putting together a proposed recommendation to county council for what a small area plan around the airport might look like should be a just sort of task item we should keep off to the side. Anyone else have just kind of any high level reactions before we go a little bit deeper on this?
Well, my highlight, this is Jaylan. My high level reaction, I actually just finished reading through the county council meeting minutes from that workshop. And I saw the word visually appealing, preserving the visual appeal quite a bit in the comments from council members. Of course, there was one council member who, it wasn't clear to me, but it sounded like he thought we may have already missed that boat because there's already a lot of visually unappealing stuff out there. But yeah, my main takeaway was preserve the beauty of this area and the gateway.
And Jalen, I would agree, and probably the person who thought we'd missed the boat, I don't think we've missed the boat. There's of course some development around 313 there, but there was also the sense that some of the developments have been quite good in terms of being back from the road and not terribly intrusive.
Thank you. I agree 100%, Bob.
So as far as supporting staff in starting to collapse what we're hearing from council members reflecting their constituents and from what we've heard directly from the community of starting to draft a vision statement, this is something that keeps coming up. So that this is our gateway, that this is our opportunity to introduce the character of Moab, that this is distinguished and distinct from the character of the town of Moab itself, that keeping this a little bit separate from existing development in and around Moab City seems conducive to that model of a gateway and that introduction. Anything else, just sort of general thematic or general words that you think we should be including in the vision, or that you particularly heard, or something that you think should not be included at this point for us to be able to start to push draft language out and get reactions? All right. Well, I imagine that will continue to evolve. But I think the more that we can support staff in synthesizing what we are hearing from various sources, the better.
Well, you know,
Go ahead, Bob.
You know, I mean, this isn't a high level vision, but it seems to me that something like Resort Special that has a not very dense amount of housing and maybe could have some conditional uses either made permitted or not used, because we know about these conditional uses, hard to stop them once they're in there, or if we want them allowed, should be allowed. And I did look at the 191 North Corridor plan, and I guess Resort Special is certainly one of the ones that it doesn't actually recommend by that name, but probably was recommended for the area north of the bridge that isn't close to the city. So I have a vision that probably doesn't have strip development all the way in. You know, maybe you do have some strip development just north of the bridge, south of Arches. So that's kind of my thought at this point.
Yeah, one thing that I think would be useful is to have a sort of a proxy map for those three options that are at the head of the survey. So there is the sort of status quo, what exists today, and what that could mean for different options of how people might utilize those properties and those zone distinctions. There is a option that is highly developed and very much that kind of combination of commercial and residential and tourism-based uses. And then there's sort of that middle model, which is the one that I see most closely reflected in the use of resort special in that area. There also was some discussion about the specifics in the code table for that underlying zone. We're very early, but this process is going to go fast. So I think the sooner that we can get things that are slightly more tangible for people to react to, the more it will aid in making sure that we are getting sufficient and effective and targeted citizen comment during this process. So what's the appetite on sort of like providing those proxies of what those three different options could look like? Is there a preference towards sort of pushing one as one that we tend to think we bias towards as our early recommendation?
I'm not sure what you mean by proxy in this context.
Proxy in the context of, we don't know how people will specifically develop that land. So we can't say this underlying zone, it's going to have this exact type of business. But to be able to say, you know, here's a potential, if I drove through this, here's how I would describe it from these three options, or things to that end. Or if we were to say, pass a recommendation that included more potential underlying zone use, like what could that look like? Because I feel as though from seeing citizen comment, there's not always a deep understanding of what different zones are intended to do and the different uses within them, and going deep into the code is, you know, it can get complex very fast. And so Bila and I were just chatting about, you know, how could we get things out on the website in association with the survey, in association with asking for citizen comment for people to react to as a straw man to what we are trying to put together as a recommended draft.
Well, one idea, I don't know if this is feasible or not, but when we were discussing the high density housing proposal, you know, one of the big issues was density and, you know, how much to allow. And something that I think was very helpful was there are these sort of, you know, mock-ups or architectural drawings of what would it look like to put a, you know, a 30-unit apartment building in this area on a lot this size next to some residential homes. I mean, this given our short time frame and limited budget, it might be hard to do, but if we could just come up with sketches of, you know, here's what it might look like 20 years in the future if we went down, you know, and these were the permitted uses and the permitted density of development, et cetera, and have people react to those. So that's one idea.
Mila, what's your response to that? Is that something feasible, or is there an alternative that we might be able to consider?
So are you specifically talking about, like how detailed are we talking about these examples?
You know, maybe, you know, more detail is better, but low detail might still be useful. I don't, but it, you know, it should be enough that it's giving an accurate impression to be. I mean, I think one of the issues that Emily was getting at is, you know, on the planning commission, we're used to saying, okay, there's a zone and minimum lot size is blah, and here's a table of uses. And I think some of us have probably gotten good at translating in our mind, okay, this is what the area is going to look like in 20 years. I think a lot of the general public might have more trouble doing that. And so some sketches might help, but I guess they also might not help if they're misleading or something. So
Right.
anyway, I'm not pushing that idea. I just wanted to throw it out there.
No, I think it's a really great idea. I think the limitation with that idea is that it would require a budget. So to get a designer to produce those sketches for us, I can talk with Chris and find out, Chris Barrett, and find out what our budget might be for an effort like that. Unfortunately, I don't believe we have any, we don't have the in-house graphic design experience that would be necessary to produce those kinds of pretty sketches. But I think something that we could potentially do is at least as like a, I mean, I'll definitely ask Chris as far as, you know, getting a consultant in to do that for us. I think in the meantime, something we could do is a simpler version with text. If we want to, you know, produce a few different maps of, you know, areas that would be, let's say, like, campground, residential, commercial node or something, or none of those things, or apartment buildings and, hotels, or, whatever our kind of options were. We could definitely do something like that as maybe a middle ground if we don't have the money to be able to hire somebody to produce some nicer sketches for us, if you're interested.
So this would just be like some kind of from above view where you sketch out where buildings might be and just label them, hotel, gas station, campground, that.
Yeah, something like that. And I think if we wanted to go, if the planning commission was interested in going in that direction, what I would just ask for is, a little bit more specific guidance as to what uses or, areas you would want to see in those examples.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be cautious in that we don't want to suggest that for individual parcels, we're recommending a use or a zone distinction, especially for the options that include, willingness to change the underlying zone or apply a different zone. So just something we'd want to consider.
So one way to get around that would be to just use an artificial parcel map that doesn't correspond with the parcels that are actually out there, and then there's no way.
Yeah, I would definitely not do the current parcel map. It would just be a very general thing.
This resort special continues to come up, and even I know it's been brought up in the past with the Planning Commission, but prior to specifically looking at this area and the specific intent behind that zone, even I had some hesitations of my understanding of it and its history. I can imagine other people feel equally the same, if not more confused by it. So I think it might be worth, as a body, just quick verbal straw poll or just verbal where you're at, what are your thoughts on leaning into that as a zone designation for this area under the original intent of why it was brought into the land use code? And just your thinking there. So Kevin, I don't know if you want to kick off. I know that you felt pretty strongly about this, but maybe you could just recap your experience of looking into that.
Yeah, and so Mila, please jump in if I say something you think is wrong, but my impression is that there was a planning effort, perhaps similar to this one, maybe 20 years ago or so, and they came up with a plan. It sounds like Bob got his hands on a copy of it and read it. I haven't seen it. And then we now have in land use code a zone that says it's meant to implement that plan, and that's the resort special zone. And so I do think that one of the most straightforward thing we could do is just take that as a starting point and make some, now that 20 years has elapsed and we might want to fiddle with the use table. We might want to make, they've got a number of things protecting visual resources. My personal feeling, as expressed in other planning meetings, is I think those need to go a little bit farther, and we could discuss options about that. I think we've also had a few different developers propose things that wouldn't be allowed by the resort special zone. And, so we should certainly on the table should be, making the use table bigger to accommodate that. We should at least ask ourselves that question. Anyway, I think that's a good, simple way to get ourselves to a workable plan in a few months. We might want to think about, but there is the issue, do we want to treat every single parcel in this planning area the same? And I think one reason we might not want to treat them all the same is that, I think the reason there's highway commercial out there now, I'm guessing, is because someone wanted to put in a gas station or something that wasn't allowed in the resort special zone, and some past planning commission just said, okay, we'll give you this other zone instead. Maybe overlays would be a better way of handling that situation. And then the final thing I'd like to throw out, this is an idea that comes, I think, from Moab City planning, is given our sensitivity to visual things out there, maybe in the allowed uses on a piece of land, we want to take topography into account. In other words, if you're not visible from the highway, the rules could be looser than if you are, very visible from the highway. We haven't traditionally done things that way, but I think it makes a lot of sense rather than trying to find a one size fits all, set of rules. So I'll stop there.
Are you suggesting that we recommend in a vision plan that be like a partial, a mechanism by which the county council could weigh the merits of a development on an individual parcel? Or are you recommending that we may want to say, using that as a code standard, such as like such and such developments or exterior use or whatever should not be visible from the highway? Because those seem distinct to me.
Yeah, I think I'm in with the latter one.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments or thoughts on that?
Well, Emily, I'd probably say I'm pretty much in agreement with that. And of course, I didn't mean to say necessarily everything is resort special. I would probably start out with thinking about how resort special would work out there. I haven't thought about it enough, maybe at the juncture of where 313 comes in, maybe you could have something else that was a bit commercial there. I haven't thought about that. That probably fits in with, you know, I've come into the entrance of towns, and maybe if there's a major thoroughfare crossing that's, I don't know how far out that is, you know, maybe 3 or 4 miles, 5 miles outside of town, isn't so upsetting. But I really am worried of strip development and very much more kind of big commercial development out there, except perhaps there. Anyway, just my thoughts early on here.
Mila, please correct me or or answer for me, because this is a question I have. You know, in thinking about this as a higher level vision statement, which is one thing that came out of the workshop, we'll want to suggest, I mean, there's predominantly 3 major underlying zones in that area. And we don't want to recommend a blanket change across the board. That would not be inviting the right process, but rather to write a vision statement so that if a developer were to own or purchase property in that area and want to get a zone change from something, you know, that it could, like, if take range and grazing and request a zone change to either resort special or highway commercial, if our recommended plan says that you know, we really recommend resort special as the underlying zone here and this modification to the use table, then the developer would be more likely to request that, because if they went before it and said highway commercial, county council would say, well, that's really not our, you know, our vision for that area. So did I summarize that correctly, of like how we in the public should be thinking about what we are doing here and the purpose of this process?
Yeah, that's about right. And I think, you know, something that we talked about earlier is that we need to be careful throughout this process to make sure that we're not confounding a planning effort to create a small area plan with a zone change effort, which should be something that would support our plan. So, you know, going back to the overall purpose of having a small area plan, the plan is really supposed to be our guiding document. And that's what County Council and Planning Commission can use to guide their decisions about projects that come before you. So basically you have the plan, and that's what tells you what you want it to look like, what general characteristics are in the area, what your vision is for that area, what, you know, what we're shooting for. And then ideally you adjust the land use code and make sure that the zone allows for those uses and disallows the uses that you don't want in that area so that it supports the plan. But, you know, of course, if we don't end up going to a zone change, which, you know, is very possible in this planning effort, hopefully it will come with, you know, modification or, you know, whatever it is so that the plan is supported. But even if it wasn't to happen, the idea is that we have a good plan in place so that when these projects come before you, like has happened in the past, you know, 6 months or so, where we've had these projects that are allowed and, you know, everybody kind of is curious about what we should do, then you're able to look at the plan and you say, this is supported by the plan or this is not supported by the plan. And likewise, it is exactly like you're saying, it's incredibly useful guidance for developers. We get people coming to our office all the time asking us what the county would like to see on a certain parcel. And, you know, while that's not a question that we are in the business of answering, it's really great to have a good planning document to say, here's the vision. You know, we came up with this as a community, the county council, you know, everybody decided that this is what it's going to be. And that really helped us get the right kinds of projects before the planning commission and the county council. So, you know, it all just works, ends up hopefully filtering down from that overarching plan. So I think it's useful to talk about resort special being a possible zone. I think it's very important to talk about, you know, the potential uses out in that area, because that's a good way to focus our discussion. We should remember that when we're talking about a plan, we aren't specifically talking about a zone, not at this moment. So ideally, the zone and the specifics of what's in that zone will come out of the plan and will then reflect what we want as our vision out there. Does that help?
Yes. So, go ahead, Ken.
Actually, well, I guess I want to go back a few months when we first started talking about the possibility of a small area plan. And I thought the consensus of the planning commission then, and this is an idea that Zachary put out, is that, you know, the reason we're calling it a small area plan rather than some full-blown planning process is we were going to spend less time on the sort of, you know, vision-y type statements and more time on just getting, you know, specific changes to the land use code that we think are needed, you know, urgently. So I'm not sure, and like in some of the things you said in this meeting, Emily, whether your takeaway from the workshop was that, you know, we shouldn't get to land use code revisions in this process and we just want to come out with some kind of vision statement or not. But it seems to me that it would be much more useful to make some changes to the resource special zone or create some other, you know, that kind of thing, so that, you know, we have the toolkit or, you know, the options available when land use applications come in the near future.
Yeah,
so-
I mean, to that end, one of the very specific directives that at least one council member, I think actually it was Jaylyn that gave us, was that they would like to see us deal with this tension between resort commercial and resort special. Now, granted, we are not looking at the area of the county where resort commercial tends to be, but there are some, I mean, the two are certainly not approached exactly the same way in the code table. So, you know, should we look at resort special and say, are there attributes of the resort commercial district that we actually think should be reflected in resort special as well? So, I mean, and Jaylyn is on this call, so she can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we have been directed, start with the vision, get as much feedback from the community, ensure that it is a community-centered vision for this area, use that to suggest an overall guiding plan for this area, and where it's appropriate, go into specifics in your recommendation, especially related to the zones that are existing in that area, to make sure that they reflect the intent of the vision and make suggestions there. At the use table level. And then we have other questions that we were sure, like, should we look at development standards? Should we look at an overlay? And my intake is that is beyond what we have been instructed to provide. So not like go through the depth of planning we went to for the overnight accommodations overlay, but give a strong vision, make targeted recommendations where it makes sense in order to support that vision, so that we can effectively make recommendations as a body, and so the county council can effectively make decisions related to development applications in that area.
Yeah, I guess that was my understanding. So I guess we should discuss it.
Well, Jaylyn's on the call. So Jaylyn, if you feel as though I'm misrepresenting, or if there's something I missed, I'd love for you to provide some extra context from what you've been hearing at the county council level.
Well, I think that you summarized it quite well. I don't believe it was me that used the words resort commercial and resort special in the same sentence. So I don't know which one that was. I will say that I did read over those two zones today, and I And I hadn't really understood the difference, and I do think that resort special fits this area far better. And I think that probably in the beginning, I may have been a council member who wanted everything spelled out in terms of, well, if you're gonna build this type of thing, then it's gotta look like this. But I have moved over to the let's create a vision so that when something comes to planning commission or council, if it doesn't fit with the vision and goals for that area, we have some concrete reasons why it doesn't fit and why it probably wouldn't fly.
I wanted to give someone else a chance to talk, but since there was silence, I will jump in. I thought that the most immediate reason that we're in this process is that the following scenario cropped up more than once. Someone owning a parcel out there that might currently be zoned range and grazing wants to develop it, perhaps similarly to the neighbors, and then people like me and others on the planning commission are reluctant to grant that zone change because they feel like the current resort special district doesn't have enough protections for visual impacts. And that, we would be more, people like me have said, we'd be more likely to grant, the zone change that would allow them to develop more, more than range and grazing allows them to, if we had a zone that kind of did a better job of preserving this area. So I thought if we do nothing else out of this process, what we want is a zone that a majority of the planning commission would feel comfortable recommending for parcels out there that are currently zoned range and grazing.
So let me take that and let me just pivot against it for the sake of time. So there's one option that's sort of not being stated, but is being spoken around, and that is recommending an overlay that may take on the characteristics of resort special, or may say, it's a resort special overlay, but to say any development in this area would be subject to these heightened development standards, more along the lines of the standards adopted as part of the overnight accommodation overlay zone. And perhaps that is the model of development standards to lean against in the short term, since they are already in the code and we are limited on cost and budget. So that's one option. A second option is, again, something that has come up rather consistently as a planning commission, which is a direction where instead of recommending an overlay zone, we recommend a vision that tends to lean against resort special as the zone designation that is most, could be most effective at maintaining the intent for this area, the vision in this area, as we've heard from the community over the last several years. There's the third option of just leaving it as is, of just saying to the county council, we actually think things are great. Here's maybe some minor modifications to what exists. So quick reactions there, especially from commissioners who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Based off of those three options, is there one of the three that you feel very strongly about? And is there anything we're missing? If we were to just get those out as something we could give to staff and say, let's play around with this. Let's see if we can come up with some draft, framing around these three.
I think we're limited on our expenses a lot. Wouldn't it be nice to do a glorious plan with pictures and everything, but the county budget is tight. And so I like the idea with, there are two existing zones out there, highway commercial, resort special, and just modifying those, maybe a few features of those two zones and to fit the area, and just make it simple, give people a choice, and an opportunity to go from grazing, because the grazing on the property out there is really not a option. I guess you could have a cow out there, but anyhow, that's kind of my thought.
So we wouldn't be making recommending a zoning change, but you see
an option to do one of those types of zones.
Okay, so a vision that's more associated with the other two zones that are as currently reflected.
Yes, yes.
let's see, Bob, Garish, Rachel, any reaction from the three of you? Or Josie?
Well,
Sorry, we have our new member this week.
so I would, I mean, you know, my vision probably doesn't have much highway commercial out there with the kinds of things that at least have been built on highway commercials, pretty dense housing oftentimes, even though, of course, they'd have to go and they aren't even in the overlay for overnight stuff. Resort special seems to me a lot more compatible with what's out there. I should say, when I looked at this plan that Kevin is right, was about 20 years old, it was interesting. They actually did it, it sounds like, in 2 or 3 days of intense stuff, getting community together and a couple of groups, can't remember who they hired to kind of be the consultants on it. And they actually came up with, it's interesting because it was kind of a workshop thing, they came up with a couple of zones, one for south of the bridge, one for north of the bridge, but south of Arches. Those zones never were conferred. They named them a certain thing and had certain kinds of densities and stuff. I do like the idea of the concreteness of thinking about what kind of zoning would be out there. I think it gets us started. We may not have the right zone to do it, but I'd probably not like to see, I know there's highway commercial out there and we aren't going to take that zone away from somebody, I'm going to guess. But I would like not to see any more highway commercial out there.
Okay. So just to piggyback on that, so going through the use tables between range and grazing, highway commercial, and resort special. Okay. Quick reminder, if you're not talking, to mute yourself. So here are some of the uses that are not allowed, if I'm reading this table right. I was trying to trace my eye down the row, under resort special. So in our tables, as reflected in the public packet, there's range and grazing, and then over on the right under non-residential is resort special and highway commercial. Dwelling of single family dwelling are allowed as permitted uses under all of those, but that is not the case for different types of higher density housing. So that's one particular use that if we were to recommend resort special in our vision, either as the recommended zone for that area or adopting pieces of that into an overlay, we may want to look at. Educational facilities, which Brian, you specifically brought up when we were drafting the survey, that would be, you know, anything from like education, environmental education, and so on, is conditional under highway commercial, not in resort special. Restaurants, fast food, and general. So this is one where if we were to recommend a vision that included predominantly resort special for that area, upzoning from range and grazing, that we might want to consider. Is there a place for that? And what standards would we recommend alongside that in order to merit that change? And so, you know, one thing Kevin mentioned is, are there development or standards that we could say, if you were within view of the highway, you have to conform to these standards? There's also been some, you know, discussion about not wanting to see strip development. So is there a way, even if it's just in the vision statement, to say, you know, we don't think that two adjacent parcels should have front side, you know, I don't know how we do that, you know, because you can't say when requesting an upzone, the actual use of the upzone is not as important. So you couldn't say can't have a restaurant on the front. So, you know, we'd have to work around with that. But do we think that there is a place where we say maybe resort commercial should be near the highway and resort special on the back. So maybe we pull some of that up. Retail is another one. Retail, we have a number of people who sell gear who do it in a way that is very dedicated to the Leave No Trace program and environmental education, and are very dedicated to the overall view of the town. Is there a tasteful way to do that, as combined with other development in the area? And there's a few others. So we have 13, my children are going wild in the background, I apologize. We've got 13 minutes left in the segment. And I want to definitely make time, we have time for citizen comment. Garish, I see you're off mute. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a couple of things to tag on to what Bob said. One is, I think we should, because scenery.
Garish, hold on. I'm so sorry. There's really bad feedback. Can everyone please mute their mic if they're not speaking right now? And Garish, you might have something in the background that's causing feedback on your end too.
How about now?
No, you're echoing. You want to try one more time? Garish, you want to come off mute one more time?
Is this any better?
Nope. If you have your speaker on, I don't know if you have headphones you can plug in maybe into your computer. That could help with the problem. But it's like a wall of mirrors.
You could also just turn the volume all the way down while you're talking. That might help.
So Garish, before you come off mute again, take the volume of your computer and bring it all the way down. Of course, you're not gonna be able to hear me tell you to come off of mute. Garish, I'd say get some headphones, and unfortunately, I think you might need to do that in order to speak or call in.
Trying one more time here.
Much better.
Okay, so I was just going to tag on what Bob said. I think having the resort special for any new rezones in that area probably is a good starting point. But specifically, I think we should come up with a strong methodology for assessing scenic values, and that could also include design criteria. So we have both the foreground, middle ground, and background taken care of. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Well said.
Really, can I just make one more comment about this discussion regarding the vision statement versus the zone use table?
Yeah.
I just want to, be clear that I'm not suggesting that we spend months on a visioning process. However, every zone has a description of what that zone is for at the beginning of the zone. We need that for our land use code. We need that to be able to guide our discussion. We just need to have some kind of statement regarding what the general characteristic of that area is going to be, so that we can then move into the details with some kind of direction versus just going through the use table willy-nilly and calling that the end of the plan. So, we don't need to go through a whole big visioning process. We're asking the community for their vision. The county council wanted us to ask the community for their vision. So I think we need to respect that we are asking that of people, and incorporate that into at least the description of whatever it is that we come up with.
Okay. Let me play back what I'm hearing from the group, and I'd love for us to be able to give staff some direction to move us forward so that we can keep the ball rolling. So certainly we have heard from the community, we've heard from county council members that this place acting as the gateway to Moab, respecting its visual characteristics and attributes is critical. there is a general feeling that resort special as a zone distinction as it's currently defined in our land use code of the existing zones available to us would represent that vision most effectively for future development. But there are some potential uses for the area that are not reflected in that zone as currently written. And so we would therefore want to recommend a path that recommends resort special as the primary zone use with these changes potentially to county council in order to reflect that vision for this area as they are reviewing future development applications and possibly related to additional planning to update the zone tables if we aren't able to get to that during this year, or to recommend an overlay district possibly in association with that, also to reflect the vision for the overall area and potential uses in smaller areas such as adjacent to the highway. So that's what I'm hearing at a very high level. And what I'd love to do is be able to give staff something to maybe come back to us with like a really light touch watercolor view of like just high level of a few different options before our next meeting. So I mean, Mila, I'd love your take on what is attainable by then and what you need from us. And also the take from the commission, just to make sure that I am effectively translating the larger discussion, and of course being mindful to the fact that the survey and community involvement is going to be the best path forward. This is in trying to get the ball moving so that we can be getting input and also getting reaction at the same time, given our tight timelines.
So I just want to say on Mila's comment, absolutely the vision is important, and it's always interesting how you get there. I think it was in the county council joint meeting that, you know, I emphasized this very funny thing of saying whether you want a gas station, whether you want housing, whether you want hotels out in this small area plan, indeed tells you something about what you want at the higher level, I guess, the vision. So I actually look at them as interacting, and we don't want to just ignore the vision while we're down in the weeds thinking about what a zone would look like and allow, but I think they can both kind of develop together. But I think she's right that we don't want to forget the vision and the vision. If you can get it, you can kind of inform what zoning might look like out there. So anyway, just 2 cents.
I did just put a link to the survey results that we have so far in the chat box. If everybody wants to check that out, we actually have 178 responses already. So, and with, you know, larger distribution, we should get even more than that. I think in response to your question, Emily, what we could do for next meeting is we could put together a few, you know, or one just very loose draft of vision or mission, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, kind of their sentences or even just words and concepts that we're seeing from Planning Commission and County Council and survey respondents. It's it doesn't, you know, it's not like there's infinite options for out there. I think other thing, and we can also compile the survey results so far for the next meeting, no problem. And then we can start potentially going through some of the uses for the zone. I think that'd be great once we get that vision, you know, somewhat fleshed out. The only thing that I was going to say is that we haven't discussed one of the things that came up at the county council meeting was whether or not to include the airport in our zone boundary. So I think we should probably figure out at some point, and, you know, we can absolutely punt that on the road a little bit, but I think that would change some of our discussion and a little bit of our zone conversation if it is or isn't included.
Yeah, I thought the consensus among it sounded like the county council liked the idea of leaving the airport out of this. And I don't recall any objections, but maybe you're just suggesting that we make that official at this meeting, that
Jarish, did you want to make a comment as well?
Yeah, in light of the, are you guys hearing me okay now, or am I still echoing?
It's better. It's not great, but it's better. You're good.
In light of the recent discussion about having a solar farm outside the airport.
I'm so sorry. I am going to stop you because it is echoey. Would you mind putting your comment in chat in the chat box, and we'll read it out loud? Well, it is really echoing. Okay. I apologize for that. It's technology.
Let me try it one more time.
Better, much better. Go for it.
Okay, in light of the recent proposal to put a solar farm out by the airport, and that being maybe a more practical place to have overnight accommodations eventually, I think that the small area plan should encompass that area.
I'd say let's get some more feedback. Let's clarify with Mary and Jalen there. I think there was some question about whether an airport plan should go all the way to I-70 if we were to pick that up at the start of next year, or if it makes more sense to do an individual plan for the airport. If we gave those two options to county, you know, they may decide to include it or say, you know what, let's just do that and look at the airport next year, or yeah, next year. I'd say let's wait until we can get some clarification from county council there, and just hold on our body's discussion with that.
I'd also like to, I'm actually very interested in developing a plan for that kind of south of Arches, north of the bridge area. And I'll reiterate my opinion again. It just seems like a much more logical place for all of these proposed developments in that area. And so maybe when we're talking about the further north airport discussion, we could kind of include that, like when we could develop a plan for that area.
So with future considerations, let's pick this back up just as far as next steps for any additional direction we'd want to get for county council and preparing for planning next year. Because there's the airport, there's potentially the airport to I-70 or north of the airport to I-70. There is the area south of Arches. Let's pick those up. I think we just need to in tandem have a separate conversation. I am mindful of time, and I just I want to just get to some sort of next steps, clear next steps here with staff. And then if we need to continue this conversation after our action items, we can. Mila, I think it would be wonderful to have a draft vision plan by the next meeting. Having a summary of the survey would also be wonderful. For planning commissioners, if there are specific items in the use tables that you believe we should be looking at, or if you have specific examples that we should be using as a use case and presenting to the public in our various, public outreach meetings that we have planned, as well as in our workshop with county council for August, let's get those into staff before our next meeting, before our next agenda goes out, so we can start to collect those as action items that they could look at. Ideally, if we could have that to them by sometime early to mid next week, that'll give them an opportunity to have that in mind as they're coming up with a plan for, or coming up with draft language. Let's see, just remote life right now. It's a little chaotic here. Anything else that I'm missing just to make sure that we can support staff in moving forward?
I'm curious about the question regarding the scenarios. Do we want to punt that till later, or did you want us to try and, come up with something with those three different options, the minimal, same, and future?
As far as the examples that Kevin was alluding to earlier?
Right.
I'm confused. What was I alluding to earlier?
You were talking about coming up with like sort of a more graphical representation of the first three options.
Okay, thank you.
I think text is fine. I don't think we need to try and go to Chris and get budget. We already know things are tight and we've been directed by county council to keep this lean. I think we can effectively do this with text and examples, or even the kind of just spatial high level map, just hypothesizing different options just to help people visualize that. And we can review those in our next meeting and just get some, I mean, I think it would help all of us to have something that's a visual cue as well.
Okay, so what I have on my list then is that next meeting we'll be looking at sort of a loose vision statement draft, including, you know, a lot of the concepts from Planning Commission and County Council, a summary of the survey, and the visual maps of the 3 development scenarios, and then, or levels of development, and then maybe I can put those zone use tables into an Excel spreadsheet if we want to be able to go through it like that with a, you know, screen share editable version.
That would be great, like we did for OAF. That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else that we are missing or misinterpreted from comments from the commission or from Jalen? Quickly.
I have a request. This is maybe more work for staff, or maybe it's work they've already done. So something that has come up quite a bit is, protecting visual resources there. And, the existing resource special zone has a few provisions about buildings and their colors that would do that. I would be very interested in knowing just what some other options are if we want to make developments in this area as visually unobtrusive as possible. And, just things, maybe example code from other cities, or maybe the National Park Service has some rules they use for their visitor centers or something. I just think that's, it seems to me, one of the most important issues, and the better job we can do with mitigation, it's kind of the more flexibility it gives us with allowing uses. And I think everyone agrees we need to try to do better than existing code, but I don't know that there's been a lot of specific ideas of how to do that, and maybe staff could plagiarize from other plans in the country and give us some ideas.
Sure, yeah, I can certainly do that. So you're looking at sort of a scenic preservation code example.
Yeah, just a lot of examples, and then we can try to discuss which ones might work well for this area.
Okay, we can include that in the packet for sure.
At our workshop, the Travel Council mentioned that that area is also a scenic byway. So there may be even examples in Utah, like Highway 12, that we could look at as well. Great. So we can return to this during future considerations, because there was a few things we wanted to pick up, but just any other pressing comments from the commissioners real quick before we turn on to our next agenda item? All right, I know this is kind of a moving target and we're all remote, so I appreciate everybody's candid comments and patience. And just since we are being recorded and streaming, I'll just also mention to the public that the best way to get involved is by joining these meetings, sending in comments via email, coming and speaking at Citizens to be Heard at Planning Commission and County Council meetings. There will be ample opportunities to have your voice heard at various meetings that we have outlined in our schedule in the packet on page 8 of the digital packet that I have. But you can certainly have your voice heard now, as well as taking the survey that is available from the county website. So this is definitely intended to be a citizen-centered, community-centered visioning workshop or process. And so please don't hesitate to join us. And with that, since it is 5:05, I'm going to open up another Citizens to be Heard section. So I noticed that a few people joined. If you want to make a comment on anything, whether it's on the agenda or not, if you could just post your name or I want to make a comment in the chat, and we'll go ahead and call you and let you come off mute. Okay. I'm not seeing anybody come through. If you're on YouTube, we're a little bit ahead of you. You're on a delay, so you're welcome to join and just post something in the chat, and we'll invite you to make your comment. Okay, so our action item tonight is an administrative item, Hideaway Estate subdivision, a 4-lot subdivision at 1640 Murphy Lane. And I believe that we do have the applicants with us. So Mila, I will invite you to make a staff report on this.
There we go. So I think that my computer will actually let me share my screen. Would everybody like me to share the plat, or do you all have it in front of you just fine? What's the consensus? Go ahead and if you want me to share it, put your hand up. Okay, I will. So let's see. Oh, that's not the right one. Here we go. And I need to refresh my screen. There we go. Okay, let me know. Hopefully this is coming through correctly. So this, we have a preliminary plat for us today. It's called Hideaway Estate. The address is 1640 Murphy Lane. The property is 3.18 acres and it is currently large lot residential. This is a 4-lot subdivision proposal. There are a couple complicating factors that we've worked through with the applicant. There is a flood zone that you can actually see on the preliminary plat, and we asked them to make sure to put that on there. It's the dashed, or the long dash and then dotted line down there by where it heads on Pack Creek. That is an undevelopable area, and that was the reason that there is a current resolution passed by council back in 1995 prohibiting subdivision of these properties because the flood mapping wasn't specific enough to be able to make sure that any of the buildable area on this side of the road was to see if there was even any buildable area on this side of the road. So this FEMA flood zone is current. The applicant is not proposing any kind of building in that area. It wouldn't be allowed under our building code anyway. So we've discussed it with the county attorney, and she's agreed that it would be, the easiest thing would just be to repeal and replace that resolution at the time of the resolution approving the final plat of the subdivision. Our flood administrator is fine with that. County attorney is good with it, and we have the flood zone marked on the preliminary plat, so, or on the, it will be on the final plat.
Mila, can I just, what's
Yes.
the straight dash line that kind of cuts across the middle of the property from northwest?
That is an easement. It's a groundwater and sewer easement.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. The other thing that we worked on with the applicant was drainage from Murphy Lane, and that's been preserved through a drainage easement dedicated to the county. The floodplain administrator and our road supervisor is good with that. And then we also had, we have all the appropriate fire turnarounds and other public utility easements are all here already. Applicant has offered and has dedicated the right of way for Murphy Lane and will be conducting the necessary improvements. And I think that's really the salient point on this one. There is a private access track there, and they do have the CCNRs ready for that. And then there will be detention basins will be required on each lot, and those are part of the grading and improvement plan that should be in your packet as well. I think that's most of what I've got for this one. Anyone, and the applicant is here as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff from the commission? All right, well, if the applicant, see, there's Gail. If you'd like to come off of mute, we'd love to, and say something if you'd like. We'd love to hear a little bit about the intent behind this application and any thoughts that you wanted to share.
Hi, can you all hear me right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. By the way, this is Les Ellison. Gail Ellison's my wife. We live currently over in Orchard Villa, and we have the intention of building our personal residences on these properties on lot number 1 and lot number 4. But one interesting thing is there's an existing home here on lot number 1 that borders on Murphy Lane. And we really want to get this approved as soon as possible. So we're not rolling in money. So we can sell that home and move forward with our project improvements. This sewer line that runs through the middle of the property kind of interfered with our development plans. So all of our building envelopes will be above that sewer line, and then we will attach that sewer line, so it's relatively simple. The county asked us to jump through some hoops here. One thing was when we originally bought this property, we didn't realize we were going to have to but we were going to ask to put a drainage easement in here. So we've agreed to put a drainage easement right here through our property for flood mitigation. That's a pretty good concession on our part. And also, Zachariah insisted that we agree to widen Murphy Lane in front of our property. And that's also going to be a considerable expense to us, but we decided to go forward with that. Also, one other thing is this existing home will be probably sold to an existing member of the Moab community. It's a pretty nice little house, and I think it'll be very affordable home for somebody in Moab. So we've jumped through all the county hoops, and we feel very positive about this project, and hope we can move forward with this. It's been a long process, guys. We started this back all the way back last September. We did our due diligence, and then we purchased it in November, and we'd really like to get moving on this. This existing home, we have to redirect the sewer line that goes down through here over this direction into the driveway. There you go.
Thank you. Since this is administrative, we don't have a public hearing, but did anyone from the commission have any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, I will entertain a motion for the sake of discussion.
Emily? So I'll move to approve the preliminary plat for Hideaway Estate subdivision located at 1640 Murphy Lane, parcel number 02-0017-0048, conditional on the following: repeal and replacement of resolution 2248 at the final plat to allow subdivision of tract 1 on the Howard tracts due to the new flooding map.
Excellent.
I'll second.
Moved by Bob, seconded by Kevin. Is there any discussion? Bob, you're welcome to go first.
I'm back. I just unmuted myself. It sounds like a fairly straightforward thing. They thought they might be in the flood zone before. FEMA has redrawn this map, and as I understand, we basically checked it, so it seems like this is reasonable. It also fits with the density that's allowed given the zoning.
I had a question for staff. The applicant referred to widening Murphy Lane. Is that just on paper, like granting an easement or right of way, or is Murphy? What exactly?
That is the same thing that we require of every subdivision in Grand County, is dedicating the right of way and then either bonding for or conducting whatever necessary road improvements there are.
Okay, so there's not going to be changes on the ground on Murphy Lane in the near future.
Not major changes, but our road supervisor, has been asking everyone, any subdividers, to widen Murphy Lane as much as possible. Eventually, it's way too narrow for its current traffic, but the only way that we are getting enough more width for the widening is through development.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other discussion? All right. Well, then I will call the question. So Bob has moved to approve the preliminary plat for Hideaway Estate subdivision located at 1640 Murphy Lane, parcel number 02-0017-0048. Condition on the following: repeal and replacement of resolution 2248 at final plat to allow subdivision on tract 1 of the Haworth tracts due to new flood mapping. So all in favor of this motion, raise your hand or say aye. Looks like we have everyone. Bob, I assume? All right, Bob,
Mine
you
not.
want to vote aye? All right, all opposed? Well, we have 6 voting aye, 1 we'll call it an abstention, and no one against, since I can't see him or hear him. So wonderful. Good luck with your development, sir.
Emily,
Thank you.
Emily, I guess I couldn't figure out how to unmute because thought I was unmuted, so I did vote aye.
Thanks, Bob. I didn't want to put words in your mouth. I appreciate it.
This is good.
Lovely. Okay, so future considerations. So one of the things we've been doing for the last several meetings, and Kevin brought this up as worth discussing, was how we want to handle public comment for citizens to be heard and for agenda items that do not include a public hearing. So what we're doing for the last several weeks is following the pattern of county council of having 2 periods for open public comment. Obviously public hearings when they exist, and generally speaking, when people have joined and have missed that or would like to make a comment, we have accommodated that. Given the fact that we've been on a really nice roll, but we've definitely had meetings that have gone late, I personally find that this works really well. You know, we're remote. It allows people multiple times to comment. And of course, we have no reason not to be accommodating about public comment unless we feel as though it would be inappropriate as far as like where we are in a planning. You know, once or twice we've said, hey, you know, please make a comment, send an email, but this is a discussion and we want to make sure that everybody feels like they can have their voice be heard in this process. So I would love to get advisement from the rest of the Planning Commission if you feel as though that's been working, or if you would like to go back to letting it be open at any agenda item, or where you think we should land.
Well, Emily, I'm actually okay as long as you use your judgment and are fairly liberal with letting people comment. You know, oftentimes there's not a lot of comment. If 1 or 2 people, let's say, had wanted to comment on this proposal, I think that's great to let them do it. And of course, if there's 10, maybe it's not possible. So I'm fine leaving it with your judgment.
Yeah, one thing I'll note, just to those who are joining on YouTube or maybe watching later, is if you join on the Zoom to listen in, we have had people say, can I make a comment in the chat window? And it's been a very helpful tool to know when people do want to speak up, which is a little bit harder when we're in person. So I do think that that's also a fallback to ensure that people have ample opportunity to be involved, to have their voice be heard, and participate in conversation.
Yeah, I guess my thought is that, you know, the way we were doing it, say last year, it seemed to be working fine. I mean, you know, so occasionally we would get maybe more comments than we wanted, but often it gave people a chance to weigh in early. I do think we need to be flexible, and I think it's great if the chair has discretion about allowing or disallowing comments, and you know, makes use of that. So I do support that, but I just think unless there's a problem with it, it just makes more sense for people to comment during the agenda item, or we could give them a choice. You know, they could comment on anything they want to at Citizens Be Heard, or they can chime in when we're actually doing the discussion. And if that's not working, then the chair can, you know, go back to this system.
So I think how we're doing it makes sense. And I'll just remind everyone on the commission, you all have, you know, Robert's rules at your disposal to at any time make a point of order, to you know, tell me that the way that this is being facilitated, or Kevin, if he's standing in as co-chair, to make a suggestion that, you know, perhaps we aren't being liberal enough or lenient enough. So I would say, for the sake of organizing our meetings and having a consistent time for people to know when to arrive, that there's no question about, do I need to be there here or then, or will I miss something? I think it's the way to make sure that we hear comments around topics on our agenda together. And I feel like it's been working well. Let's hold on to this. And if there's any further concern, you know, use Robert's rules in the meeting, and of course, bring it up in future considerations again, if we need to. Were there any other things that we needed to address during future considerations that came off of our conversation earlier?
I wanted to respond to something Garish said about the northern boundary. I'm going to try to summarize what I thought was the consensus of the county council, which is that the airport area is sufficiently different from the 313 junction that it doesn't make sense to sort of have one set of rules that applies to both places. Some things that get brought up are like solar farms, or, you know, rail terminals, or light and, you know, industrial uses. Some people were saying, you know, none of those are things we probably want to see at the 313 junction. All of those are things that some people want to see at the airport. And so the suggestion was these should be separate planning efforts. Once we're done with the 313 area, then we can go on. And if that's is our highest priority, we could do a plan for the airport. But that wouldn't be efficient to try to do them both at once. And I thought that made sense.
I agree. Garish, did you have any other comments about that? Okay. Mila, just crossing my T's here. I want to make sure that staff got the direction that you all need in order to move forward, and that we are on track with where we intended to be at this point in order to stay with the schedule that we have put in front of us.
Yes, I think we definitely have enough direction. We will try to stay on the schedule as much as possible. I think it would be good to try and get another workshop meeting with county council on the schedule as we can.
So let's talk about that really quick. So we are coming to the end of July, and we did have a meeting planned for some time in August with county council. I imagine this one will be virtual as well. So are there any dates of travel that commissioners have that you know you absolutely won't be able to attend a workshop? Let's start there.
I guess I wonder, I mean, before we have another workshop, I'm hoping that we can, I just wonder if there's milestones we want to meet with the planning to make the workshop more effective. Because, you know, if we were to have one next week and we, you know, it kind of wouldn't make, it would be redundant with the one we've already had. And then that might let us know whether we want to meet like really late in August or even early September or not.
That's a great point. So Mila, just looking at our proposed timeline, we, at this point, now I know that there will be some flex on this, but we had in our original schedule a final draft of small area plan by September 7th. So given current workload on your end, given where you anticipate will be, I guess, you know, one, do you have any recommendations around timing just offhand? And two, do you have specific things in mind that you anticipate we would want to have on that agenda, or anything we'd want to accomplish before then?
So I'm looking at meeting schedules and everything, and I think that there's a council meeting on the 18th and there's a council meeting on the 1st. So if we consider, I think we had originally talked about wanting to give the public, you know, at least a month or so to be able to find out about the survey and respond and give their input. You know, we really only released it about, I would say, last week. So, you know, that takes us into the middle of August with public comment. And it sounds like we probably don't want to have too final of a draft until we let that time period expire. So I think that at this point, we would probably be looking at the beginning of September for hopefully the last workshop with the county council, and then a good draft of a plan, final draft of a plan after that. I think the only danger is if we come up with a good preliminary draft and then during that workshop we have a lot of redirectional comments. And that's fine. It just means that it would take us a little bit more time to finalize that draft. So I guess it depends on, how comfortable everybody is in terms of time in between meetings and draft. If we can do a little bit, if we can do it again with the Google Doc, I think that worked really well last time with that collaborative effort in between meetings, then we should be a little bit more efficient and then be able to discuss what we have at the meeting. Next, let's see, our planning commission. Oh, I think they left our calendar. So we'll have to get those back on there. But yeah, so I think, maybe we could shoot for that August 18th council meeting. I think more realistic would be the September 1st council meeting. I just want to be sensitive to some council members' concerns about stretching out the timeline too far. So
How do we feel about trying to get a sort of high-level Google Doc set of priorities? These are the questions that we believe we have answered. These are the questions we believe we need to answer ahead of the August 18th meeting, and see if we can get it included in their packet, and ask for them to put some time aside during their meeting for discussion of that as a group on their end, and then come back to us with any additional direction. And that way, if we do postpone to the September 1st meeting for a workshop, ideally, we are less likely to get that kind of last minute, nope, you're totally off base. That would require some work on our part to make sure that we're prioritizing our time to get that to them by what, the 15th, so it can be included in their packet.
that would be well, ideally the 12th is when that would be for the packet. I think that's a great idea though, if people think that's possible. We can work on that from our end.
Anyone have any concerns about that approach or timing specific to that approach?
Emily, I like that approach. And the worst that can happen is we don't get it in that packet. We're no worse off than we were by just having the workshop on the 1st. But if we can make that deadline, that's great.
Awesome. I mean, I imagine we'll have at least something to share, even if it's not super baked. And, one of us can attend that meeting as well to provide any extra context to the county council and make sure that if they have any questions or direction, we're there to receive it. So
then it sounds like we'll ideally shoot for another final workshop prior to the September 1st county council meeting.
that would be great. I have no sense of time right now, so I don't even know what day Labor Day is. So we'll just want to be mindful. I don't know if that'll affect their schedule. But great. So let's do that. So we'll create a shared Google Doc, and the discussion here, we just want to make sure that we're translating our discussion to them, the assumptions we're making, right? There were a couple of these questions that came up about, are we interpreting county council's comments and directions effectively or appropriately? So that's the kind of thing we can push them. We also can share where we're at with the survey, the findings from any citizen comments that we've received so far, and make sure we're providing that context as well. All right. Any other comments there? Otherwise, we will move on to building permits. So any other thoughts or any other future considerations we need to make sure that we capture? All right. Recent building permit review. Do we have any? Yes.
Yes. And I'll just share my screen again so everybody can see that. So we had 5 of the new Wingate Village self-help homes have begun. 1 manufactured home, 1 actual just regular new construction residential, 2 remodels, one mixed use addition remodel. I think that was on Highway 191. And then 3 new solar permits, 3 new residential construction in Castle Valley, and then 1 addition. And I wasn't sure if you wanted to have Castle Valley on here or not, but I did call it out separately.
I think it's useful.
Okay. And then I also wanted to mention that I am not including things like electrical permits and those sort of smaller building department permits.
Good to see the solar. That's wonderful. All right. Jumping around in my packet here. Any questions for staff related to those items? Okay, so we'll do the County Council action items report followed by the County Council update.
The action item is that the Peakview subdivision decision was postponed to the August 4th meeting. The developer wanted to, it looked like it was going to move, the agreements were going to fail again, and the developer wanted to be able to come back with a new plan, which they have just presented to us this morning. So that will be back on the agenda on August 4th. I think that was it. Well, actually, that's not true. There was the replat lot combination, the route replat that was approved.
Great. Jalen?
Okay. So I'll start with coronavirus. The last report that I gave at this meeting, so I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago, we had 26 cases. Now we're at 38. 5 of those are active. And we've had 2 hospitalized, but currently there's just 1. And then Mila explained the Peakview situation. So I look forward to seeing what the developer comes up with for an alternate proposal. County Council approved the formation of the committee to investigate the possibility of a solar farm at the airport. And of course, approved the appointment of Josie as the newest Planning Commission member. Elaine reported that they've had a couple of events cancel. That would be Rally on the Rocks and Outer Bike. They have both canceled their events. The organizer, not the county, the organizer has canceled those events. I just saw an email and a press release today that a new park superintendent has been hired, and her name is Patricia Trapp. And that is all I have to report.
Jalen, I have noticed 2 people asking if there is a place where we can go to find deeper data related to current case counts and other statistics, such as is it testing percentage rate is one that I've particularly seen people be interested in. Are you aware, is there any data portal, whether it's managed by the county or the state, that people could go to find out number of tests run, testing, what percentage of tests are coming back positive? And also, I've seen a few people ask about, of the tests that are coming back positive, we are reporting the cases here in the county, but how many of the positive tests are residents of Grant County versus non-residents of Grant County?
Yeah, I was just gonna try to get on the website, but the Southeast, I had some constituents ask me kind of those same questions. And the Southeast Utah Health.com website actually has quite a bit of information. I think you have to go down to resources. I was surprised to see it all. Updates. No, I'm not seeing it, but I did get an emailed document to me from Brady, and that's been a couple of weeks ago, and they do have that information. So I can I'll click around a little bit and have a better answer and email this board if that will work.
That would
Because
be
I don't
wonderful.
feel like I have time to click around on this site right now, but both that website and the state's coronavirus update, coronavirus.utah.gov, I believe, they have a ton of information down to where the outbreaks are occurring in nursing homes and long-term care facilities. It takes a little bit of clicking, but there's a lot of information on those two websites.
Wonderful. Well, I know that my family included, many people are using that positivity rate as an indicator of sort of the barometric status of this current situation we're in. So I think it would be wonderful if we could get that information somewhere on the county website a little bit more, or the health department website a little more accessible. But I appreciate, as always, the updates. Great. All right. Any final questions or a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor. Have a great one,
Aye.
everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you.